Now, in his address to the nation on Independence Day this year, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said that India will be a developed country by 2047. Backing this, or at least leading into that direction, is now a report by the State Bank of India, which states that 13.6% of the population has left the lower income strata and migrated upwards in the annual year 23 as compared to annual year 12, which is March 2012 to March 2023, and this is when the report has been combined as well. The data from these years have been combined. Now, it also adds that 25% of the ITR filers are expected to leave the lowest income strata by financial year 2047. Basically, what this points towards is the rise of the great Indian middle class. During the course of the show, we will keep getting you the numbers that the report has given out for India's economy. But let me also tell you the other side of this report. Rating agency Moody's has affirmed India's Baa3 rating, but it has flagged concerns of debt burden and curtailment of political dissent and populist policies. So is it efficient policy by the Modi government or a general global upward trend in which India too is flowing? And what about domestic political concerns? I take this to my guests on the show tonight. I'm joined by Subhash Chandra Garg, former Finance Secretary of India. Dr. Santosh Mehrotra, senior economist, joins us. Madhavan Narayan, also senior journalist, joins us on the show. And Vijay Sardana, economic affairs expert, also joins us tonight. Good evening and welcome, gentlemen, on Beyond the Headline. Thank you so much for talking with Mirror Now. First to you, Vijay Sardana ji, this report is out and it gives out extremely positive numbers and a positive outlook of India's growth trajectory, citing the fact that ITR filers have increased over the past several years. And also the fact that the middle income group will now expand, the lower income group will travel upwards to the middle income group. First of all, your thoughts on this report. How do you see this in today's context?
First of all, good evening to you, to the fellow panelists and the viewers. See, this is very logical the way we are today looking at India, for two simple reasons. One, we are one of the largest market, or I will say that largest market with 1.4 billion plus consumer base. Second, this market is upgrading from commodity-based market to a value addition market. When you are talking of value addition, it means there is a purchasing power in the market. On the other side, that value addition also brings the prosperity in the society. And when we are talking about value addition opportunity, which is clubbed with the education level upgrading, the infrastructure is upgrading, and the Indian consumer market is becoming globalized. Both sides by expanding our knowledge base, which is a knowledge-based economy, as well as the consumption habits. If you put all of these things together, it definitely improves the income per capita basis. And when income per capita basis is increasing, both ways, you can say that people are coming out of poverty and government is also getting more revenue, which they can invest back on infrastructure and other facilities which will improve the quality of life. So it is an integrated cycle which is happening. And the way things are happening, India is an unsaturated market. Today we are in a developing stage. And in developing market, global investors also feel very attractive because they know this is a market of 1.4 billion. If we invest in our factories in India, chances of profitability and growth is much higher than investing in any either small size economy or saturated economy like Europe or America, or a controversial economy like China. So that is why if you look into global, if you take the all options available on the table, I feel for investors, India is the attractive place. There is a domestic potential and domestic entrepreneurship clubbed with the knowledge economy. All are the factors which will take the India towards upgradation in economy, upgradation in per capita income, and that will lead to a developed economy.
Okay, Dr. Santosh Mehrotra, how do you see this report amid the fact, as Vijay Sardanaji mentioned, that the Chinese economy is dwindling currently, and that gives a one-upmanship for the Indian economy. And the report also suggests that 13.6% of our population will, move upwards from the lower income strata to the middle income strata. How do you see these numbers really being put out by the report?
I'll come back to the India estimate in a minute, but may I just respond to what you just said about China. China is actually not declining. China's growth rate might fall, but it's not declining by any means. And in any case, its GDP is 5 times ours. And even if it grows at 4%, it will be a much bigger increase than if we grow at 7%. So let's just get that Schadenfreude feeling among Indians out of the way. Let's come back to the report of the SBI. I have the slides, and it's a slide. It's a set of slides. It's a deck open in front of me, and I've been going through it. And there have been other reports of this kind earlier. So let me make a few points here. It makes a number of statements about what will happen between now and 2047. That's 25 years ahead. That's based on a series of assumptions. We don't know whether those assumptions are going to be realized. Point one. Point two, just remember where we are and where we've been in the last 20 years. Between 2004 and 14, we experienced 8% growth versus 5.7% growth between 2014 and 2023. In the previous period, 140 million people rose above the standard poverty line, which is the national poverty line. We have no such estimate for India. We are not talking about multidimensional poverty because the improvement in multidimensional poverty was much greater between 2005 and 2015. Thirdly, this report makes a point about ITRs having increased, income tax returns having increased very significantly between 2014 and now. Well, what it doesn't tell you is that 75% of those who file income tax returns, even though their numbers are increasing, don't pay any tax or practically no tax. Fourthly, it makes a claim that the processing of income tax returns have become more efficient. Well, a Asian Development Bank report just two or 3 years ago pointed out that compared to most Asian countries, the number of tax staff that we have in our country as a proportion of our labor force, as in a proportion of our population, is way below that of most Asian countries. So, in fact, we could collect much more tax if our tax staffing was much bigger. So, I would urge the government to look at this international comparison and actually get more staff to actually improve the actual tax collection. Finally, it makes a very interesting point about the interstate disparity about income tax returns and looks at GSDP of various states. And it talks about how cooperative federalism has been promoted by interstate migration from the Hindi belt states normally to the southern and the western states. But it also says, very interestingly, because this speaks to the inequality that has been growing, inter-income inequality. And I'll close with a final point about the middle class that you talked about, that there's been an addition of GDP in the richer states and a decline in the poorer states, which are the sending out states, the migrant sending out states. So it's balancing it out. Very interesting. Final point about middle class. Who's defining this middle class? How do we know what the thresholds are? Where is the lower middle class? Where is the poor? We don't have any estimate for the poor. Where is the upper middle class? You know, these are estimates that another report had put out. I have that rather report in front of me as well. It's called the Price Survey, a brief about ICE, household surveys on India's consumer economy. In India, in a highly informalized economy, and this is my last point, you cannot estimate income, and you are doing it on the basis of income tax returns, which account for 5% of India's workers.
Okay. Okay, let me take this point across to Subhash Chandra Garg. Subhash Chandra Garg, you've been a former finance secretary. You've also, you've been, of course, in the middle of how the government is operating through all of these, categories, the strata, how it's defined, and how, these things are worked out. And like Dr. Santosh Mehrotra said, that even if we don't compare ourselves with China, within the country and in comparison to global standards and global economies, we shouldn't be as happy as we are about the state of affairs, vis-a-vis the Indian economy. Do you resonate with that? And also help us understand, how, as Dr. Mehrotra said, how are these stratas decided? What is the middle income group? What is the low income group? How are these really defined and decided?
I think let's first understand the report correctly, in my judgment. See, what essentially the SBI report is saying is that the income has gone up from something like 3.5 lakh to about 14 odd lakh per person of the people who file the income tax return. That is the mean income which has gone 3 times or so in last 9 years. And that is the indication, that's the claim that the incomes are rising very fast and India's middle class is doing very well. Now, 2 points here. Number one, as SBI reports itself also says, that there are about 53 crore workers in India. Of that, only about 7.8 crore files the return. That means that as much as 5/6 of about 80-85% of the workers don't earn enough to file the return. I think when we rejoice that the 7 or 8 odd crore people file the return and their incomes are higher, we should also be conscious of the fact that as many as 45 crores odd workers don't have income to file the returns. And that's a very large number of people who don't file return. The second point I think is more important. That's where we should be looking at. The SBI report analyzes in terms of the slabs. So we have slabs up to 5 to 10 and more. The people who file the returns, 80% of them are in the income tax slab below 10 lakhs. Only 20%, that means roughly about 1.6 crore people who file the returns have income more than 10 lakhs. The rest are having much less. If you do a little bit of calculation, it would tell you that the people, the 1.6 crore odd people who have income higher than 10 lakhs or average, they actually have their average. Those who have higher than 10 lakhs is much more, maybe something like about 25 to 30 lakhs. But those who have income less than 10 lakhs, the 80% of who file the returns, their average income is not even 3 to 3.5 lakhs. So in substance, what you would find is that 1.6 crore out of 53 crore people in India who are workers and who earn income are actually better than the average of 13.5 lakhs. That's too small a number. The second thing which we should remember is that the income tax filing does not actually generate income. It is the generated income by the GDP and the growth in the economy, which gets reflected in the ITR returns. And India's GDP at current prices from 2013-14 to 2023-24, the 9 years which this report covers, have grown up by 2.5 times, and this income growth is about three and a half times growth. So much of the growth is coming from the growth in the per capita income, but the larger growth actually has gone for much smaller number of about 1.6 crore, and that actually tells you that there is a disparity, there is unequal distribution of income. So on the whole, I don't think this report tells you that there is a lot to rejoice about, that incomes are getting higher. What it tells you is that only a small minority of people in India are actually getting much higher incomes, and the rest are suffering.
Okay, Madhavan Narayanan, the report takes into account 2013 to 23 data, and these years have seen a pandemic, they've also seen a war, and right now we're all living in a post-pandemic and a post-war era. How much of do you think these two, unprecedented incidents would affect the Indian economy? They have, we've got external headwinds, but the IMF and the World Bank and, global agencies have always, presented the Indian economy in a very resilient and positive light, and said that, and among global economies, they've always suggested that the Indian economy has a positive growth outlook in the near future. In that context, how do you see this report, and how do you see, what are the various factors that might have contributed to this kind of an outlook that global agencies have given for the Indian economy?
Shreya, let me begin by using a Hindi proverb, Bahti Ganga mein sab haath dho lete hain. Everybody washes their hands in the flowing Ganges. And in India, the rise of the middle class is the growing Ganges. I go back to 1990, when I actually covered the entry of Pepsi into India, when they said that Pepsi wants to come into India badly because India has a huge middle class and it's a market you can't miss. So from there, the middle class, I have written myself stories based on Planning Commission data on when I estimated about nearly 30 years ago, the size of the middle class at around 200 million. There were always arguments on how do you draw the line, what is the measure of income and all. But as my two previous speakers, Dr. Mehrotra and Dr. Garg, have very efficiently pointed out, all sorts of data points can be thrown at. One point I want to mention in humor is that we should call ourselves the proxy data republic, because we don't seem to be getting the real data. We seem to be using proxies all the time. So when employment data was challenged by the Center for Monitoring Economy, which showed high unemployment, we had other economists using the Provident Fund data to show that there is a growth in employment. Now we have income tax returns as being used as the proxy for what should be done by, let's say, the National Council for Applied Economic Research or the NSS survey. So that is, again, not efficient enough from a data point of view, as Dr. Garg pointed out so well, and of course, Dr. Mehrotra. But the real question is, why the last 10 years alone? There are two things I want to say here. The Prime Minister himself mentioned that multi-dimensional poverty has been resulted in 13 crore people moving above the poverty line, which basically tallies with what you said. If that is the number of people going up above the poverty line, then nearly twice that number will probably go up from the lower to the higher middle class, because income distribution in India is always warped. Now, the other interesting thing is this: during Dr. Manmohan Singh's time, the average GDP growth of India was about 6.8%. And the same rate has persisted over the next decade. So there is a secular Ganges flowing of the middle class growing. So it's not surprising at all. And anecdotally, you can look at it at how the global IT companies are setting up base in India. There are, it's easy for people, all universities and higher education institutions advertising about people at the age of 22 and 23 getting packages of 20 lakhs per year So all that tallies with what you say and the SBI
Sure.
says and previous speakers have said. But let me point out that the Oxfam, which is we don't have inequality measurements in India, which is very sad because Gini coefficient. Nobody says what is the Gini coefficient of the Indian economy. That is the dog that did not bark in the Indian political economy story. And the Oxfam estimated about 5 years ago or 6 years ago that the top 1% of India's population now holds 73% of the wealth, whereas the poorest saw only 1% increase in their income when the rich were seeing it multiply. And that is corroborated by your data, and which Dr. Garg so explained so beautifully. So we also have to address the issue of inequality. But make no mistake, this is a country in which nano as a car for the poor failed, or the poorer sections of the middle class failed, whereas BMWs and Audis have been selling like hotcakes. That should tell you the story on what is happening. The good news is that the introduction of GST has resulted in a lot of tax capture, as they call it, because a lot of people who were evading taxes are now being forced to pay taxes through the expenditure route through the GST, which is a sort of a good news. I would urge some economists to study GST as a better proxy for middle class growth. And the other point I want to mention is that
let me take this across to
Let me just complete.
Okay, I'll come back to you. Let me take this across to Vijay Sardana. Yeah, quickly make your point. 20 seconds, Madhavan Narayanan, and then I'll go to Vijay Sardana ji.
Yeah, all I want to say is that these data should be considered as accurate, but not something peculiar to the past 10 years. And that we also need to measure inequality, and we also need to measure what it means for growth in the lower sections of the society, because during the pandemic and also earlier during demonetization, we had data suggesting that people were being pushed below the poverty line. So nothing should be seen in isolation.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, quickly, Vijay Sardana, Madhavan Narayanan just answered a question that we have been wondering on this channel, whether it's efficient policy by the Modi government, or is it just the global trend that Indian economy is flowing with? And, according to him, it's Behti Ganga mein haath dho rahe hain sab. But, what is your thought on this? Has the Modi government's, policies and schemes like the Startup India, nurturing the startup ecosystem, or Skill India, skilled workforce, Jan Dhan Yojana, Mudra Yojana, have all of these contributed to, some sort of growth or some sort of contribution, even if it's minor, to providing that impetus that the Indian economy might have needed?
It's an important point. Let me tell you there's something very fundamental. I don't go with the secondary data, what people are sitting in universities or think tanks churn out. I talk to manufacturers, I talk to the companies, I work in the field. I'm just telling you what is happening in the marketplace. And that is what the True India is all about. Now, one side we are saying that India's tax collection is increasing. Where this tax is going when government is investing through the budget options, 40 lakh crores around budget which is going around, it is going back into economy. When you're investing the tax collection in infrastructure, in building hospitals, aims like hospital, IITs and so many schemes, Jan Dhan scheme and whatnot, ultimately it is going back into the economy. Now, one thing which everybody is talking about, disparity, is that 1% top is earning more and rest is going down. You have to also understand this is a natural phenomenon. Artificially, you cannot spread the wealth. It means, that is, I always say that why we have a disparity so much into the system, because our education system is defective. Let me give you a live example today. One side, we are recruiting people at low skill level. You get people in 100 CVs and you can easily pick up. Today, I was interviewing director for one of the organization where I represent. Fourth round of interviews, we are not getting the right candidate for the post of directors. Now, if you are getting a right candidate for the post of director and you want to retain the talent, you have to pay much more than what is the average market price. Disparity is bound to spread, bound to increase. What I'm trying to say is that in a society, one side you have an unskilled, illiterate workforce, and then you have a very limited skilled manpower with proper skill sets in a modern world. I'm not interested in education like PhDs or MScs. Please understand. Here I'm talking about the manpower
Okay,
who
sure.
understands the modern
Yeah.
economy, who can compete in the market, who can stand and who can grow the organization. Very, very handful of people in the economy because we are not grooming people accordingly. So there is bound to be disparity. Now issue comes up here is that we are
Okay.
investing whatever we are collecting as tax fund. Banks are extending credit lines, which is going on. On the other side, exports are increasing, so money is coming back. Then you have a remittance which is coming back into India, which is again going into economy. Then you have a foreign investors coming into India and investing because we are the largest market today. Plug in all these things and see what we are going to do. All this money is bound to go to people, those who have skill sets, those who can offer services, those who can offer products. I met many, many companies in various seminars, conferences of industries. But how's the growth rate? People, managing directors, head of the organizations, head of the factories are saying, sir, we planned for 500 tons and we estimated that we will have capacity utilization in a year's time. I'm selling 5 times what I planned.
Yeah.
What I'm
Okay.
trying to say is that even the corporate, those who have right understanding of the market, they are gearing up. Percolation will take time. For that, we have to upgrade the skills, we have to upgrade the infrastructure, we have to
Okay.
make
Okay,
people
Vijay Sardana.
understand how the
Point
economy
taken.
works.
Yes. All right. All right. I'll have to wrap up this discussion right now. I know this is such a vast subject that we can go on and on, but I have paucity of time. But thank you so much, Subhash Chandra Garg, Dr. Santosh Mehrotra, Vijay Sardana, and Madhavan Narayanan for joining us tonight and sharing your perspective on the Indian economy and the latest SBI report. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us on Mirror Now. And with that, we're going to wrap up Beyond the Headline, but news and updates will continue on the other side on Mirror Now. Thank you very much for joining us right now. Bye-bye and good night.